November 12, 1943. Outside Zhitomir, occupied Ukraine. Yuri Bondarenko lies in frozen mud beneath a German field telephone line, wire cutters in one hand, a coil of salvaged copper wire in the other. Above him, suspended between wooden poles, runs the main communications trunk, connecting German 4th Panzer Army headquarters in Zhitomir to Army Group South Command in Kiev. This single wire carries every order, every intelligence report, every logistical coordination message for 180,000 German troops fighting across central Ukraine. Cut this wire, and 4th Panzer Army goes silent. Except, cutting the wire is exactly what the Germans expect. They've stationed guards every 500 meters along the line. They conduct patrols every 30 minutes. They've buried detection wires that trigger alarms if the main line is severed. They've installed automatic testing equipment that checks line continuity every 15 minutes. The German Signals Corps has turned this telephone line into a fortress. Soviet partisan units have tried to cut it 17 times in the past 3 months. 17 attempts, 0 successes, 14 partisans killed, 3 captured and executed. The Germans repair cuts within 20 minutes. Even when partisans succeed in severing the line, German repair crews arrive so quickly that communications outage lasts less than half an hour. Not long enough to matter. Not long enough to disrupt operations. What the Wehrmacht Signals Corps doesn't know, what German security forces can't predict, what nobody in occupied Ukraine understands, is that Yuri Bondarenko isn't planning to cut the wire at all. He's planning to splice it. Splice it in a way that maintains electrical continuity, so the automatic testing equipment detects nothing wrong. Splice it in a way that looks completely normal to repair crews inspecting the line. Splice it in a way that turns every German telephone conversation into a broadcast that Soviet intelligence can intercept. He's going to bug the entire 4th Panzer Army using garbage wire and spit. The Germans will never know their communications are compromised. And for 6 weeks, every tactical order, every intelligence assessment, every logistics report from 4th Panzer Army will flow directly to Soviet partisan intelligence. The operation is insane. The technical requirements are impossible. The risk is suicidal. But if it works, it will compromise an entire German army without them ever knowing. Military field telephones in 1943 operate on simple principles that haven't changed much since 1900. 2 wires carry electrical signals representing voice. 1 wire is positive, 1 is ground. Complete the circuit, and electricity flows. Current variations create magnetic fluctuations in the telephone receiver, producing sound. The system works because it's simple, reliable, and requires minimal infrastructure. String 2 wires between locations, connect telephones at each end, and communication is established. The German Feldfernsprecher 33, the standard Wehrmacht field telephone, operates on this principle. Range, up to 20 kilometers with good wire. Power, hand-cranked magneto generator. Clarity, adequate for tactical communications. The system's vulnerability is also its strength. Because it's simple, it's difficult to sabotage effectively. Cut the wires and the circuit breaks. Automatic testing equipment detects the break immediately. Alarms trigger. Repair crews respond. The outage lasts minutes, not hours. But there's another vulnerability, one the Germans haven't considered. If someone could tap the line without breaking it, they could intercept every conversation without the Germans knowing. Telephone line taps exist, Intelligence services use them. But conventional taps require direct electrical connection to the wire, which means exposing the copper conductor, which means creating a visible splice point that German repair crews would detect during routine inspections. Unless the splice is invisible, unless the tap is disguised as a repair, unless the connection is so crude, so garbage-looking, that German engineers dismiss it as field expedient maintenance rather than intelligence collection. Yuri Bondarenko is about to create exactly that. Born July 8, 1919, in a village outside Zhitomir, Yuri is a collective farm electrician who maintained tractors, generators, and electrical systems before the war. No formal engineering education, no signals intelligence training. Just practical experience keeping Soviet agricultural equipment running with inadequate parts and improvised repairs. When Germany invades in 1941, Yuri's village is occupied within 3 weeks. He survives by working as a laborer for German administration. By day, he repairs electrical systems for the occupiers. By night, he monitors German communications using a salvaged radio receiver. In 1942, Yuri joins a Soviet partisan unit operating in the forests south of Zhitomir. The unit commander, Major Alexei Petrov, assigns him to signals intelligence because he understands electricity. "We need to disrupt German communications," Petrov tells him. "Find a way." Yuri tries conventional methods. He cuts telephone lines. The Germans repair them in 20 minutes. He sabotages switching stations. The Germans rebuild them in 3 days. He attempts to destroy telephone poles. The Germans install new ones within 12 hours. Nothing works. The German Signals Corps is too efficient, too well organized, too prepared for conventional sabotage. On November 10, 1943, Yuri is observing a German repair crew working on the main Zhitomir-Kiev trunk line. A tree branch has fallen, breaking one of the wires. The repair crew splices in a replacement section using standard German field splicing technique. Strip the wire insulation, twist the copper conductors together, wrap with rubber tape, cover with fabric insulation. Total repair time, 14 minutes. Yuri watches and realizes something important. The Germans aren't checking old splices. They're only inspecting for new damage. That means if he creates a splice that looks old, looks like a previous repair, the Germans won't examine it closely. And if the splice maintains electrical continuity, the automatic testing equipment won't detect anything wrong. But how do you tap a telephone line with a splice that looks like garbage repair? Yuri returns to his hideout and sketches the concept. Standard German field splice. Clean, professional, proper materials. Yuri's planned splice. Crude, improvised, barely functional looking. But hidden inside the crude splice, a secondary connection, leading to a passive listening device. The secondary connection can't draw power from the line, or the testing equipment will detect the voltage drop. It has to be completely passive, just a physical connection that allows a separate receiver to detect the electromagnetic fluctuations in the wire. Yuri knows exactly how to do this. He's been making crude electrical repairs on Soviet tractors for a decade. He calls it collective farm engineering. Use whatever materials are available. Make it work. Make it look terrible, but function adequately. On November 11th, Yuri presents his plan to Major Petrov. "I can tap the German trunk line without them knowing. Cutting it doesn't work. They repair too quickly. I'm not cutting it. I'm splicing it. making it look like a field repair the Germans did months ago. Inside the splice, I'll install a secondary connection to a listening device hidden underground. The Germans will detect the tap. Not if it's completely passive. No power draw. Just a physical connection that lets us detect current fluctuations from a distance. How far away? 10 meters. We bury a listening coil near the line. The coil picks up electromagnetic radiation from the wire. We run a wire from the coil to a receiver hidden 200 meters away in the forest. The Germans will see the wire. We bury it 30 centimeters deep. They won't see anything unless they're specifically looking for it. Petrov is skeptical. This sounds insane. It is insane, but cutting the line doesn't work. This might. If you're caught, they'll torture you. If I don't try, we keep fighting blind while the Germans coordinate freely. Petrov approves the operation. November 12th, 02:30 hours. Yuri approaches the German telephone line at a location 4 kilometers southeast of Zhitomir. He selected a spot where the line passes through forest, away from guard posts, but still within the main trunk route. The location has thick vegetation and a small depression where he can work without being visible from the road. He carries a coil of salvaged copper wire, stripped from destroyed Soviet vehicles, rubber tape, scavenged from German supply dumps, fabric insulation, torn from old uniforms, wire strippers, pliers, a small shovel, and a listening coil, wound from 200 meters of thin copper wire around, an iron core salvaged from a transformer. The listening coil is the key component. It doesn't need direct electrical connection to the telephone line. It just needs to be close enough to detect the electromagnetic field generated by current flowing through the line. Place it within 10 meters, and it will pick up enough signal for a receiver to decode. Yuri's plan: create a splice that looks like a crude field repair. Install the listening coil nearby. Connect the coil to a buried wire leading to a hidden receiver position. The splice itself will be visible to German inspections, but it will look like old repair work. The buried wire will be invisible. The receiver position will be 200 meters away in dense forest. At 02:45 hours, Yuri climbs the telephone pole. The main trunk line is 2 wires, each 3 millimeter diameter copper, insulated with rubber and fabric. The wires are in good condition. No obvious damage. No recent repairs. This is a problem. If Yuri creates a splice on undamaged wire, the Germans will immediately know someone tampered with the line. He needs an excuse for the splice. He needs damage. Yuri carefully strips 5 millimeters of insulation from one wire at a point 2 meters from the pole. He nicks the copper conductor with his wire cutters, creating a partial break that looks like mechanical damage from wind-blown debris. The circuit is still complete. Current still flows. The automatic testing equipment won't detect anything wrong. But now, there's visible damage that requires repair. Yuri creates his splice. He cuts the wire completely at the damage point. He strips insulation from both ends. He twists the copper conductors back together. Then, before wrapping the splice, he attaches a third wire. This wire is thin, barely 1 millimeter diameter. It connects to the copper conductor inside the splice, hidden beneath the rubber tape and fabric insulation. The connection is crude, barely making contact, but sufficient to carry the electromagnetic signal. Yuri wraps the splice with rubber tape, then fabric insulation. The final result looks terrible, sloppy. The kind of repair a Wehrmacht signal soldier would make in the dark during winter. Exactly what Yuri wants. He descends the pole and buries the thin wire, running it 10 meters to a position beneath a fallen log. There, he buries the listening coil, positioning it carefully, so the telephone line passes directly overhead. The coil is 15 centimeters in diameter, wound with 200 turns of copper wire. It's crude, but it will work. From the coil, another wire runs 200 meters south into the forest, buried 30 centimeters deep the entire way. At the terminus, Yuri installs a salvaged German radio receiver, modified to pick up the extremely low-frequency signals from the telephone line. The receiver is hidden in a waterproof container buried beneath a distinctive rock formation that Yuri can find again. Total installation time, 3 hours, 20 minutes. Yuri retreats to the Partisan camp at 06:05 hours, just before dawn. At 06:30 hours, a German patrol walks past the telephone line. They glance at the poles. Everything looks normal. At 0800 hours, German automatic testing equipment conducts a line continuity check. Voltage, normal. Resistance, within acceptable parameters. The line is operational. At 0845 hours, a German signals officer at 4th Panzer Army headquarters places a call to Army Group South in Kiev. This is Hauptmann Richter, 4th Panzer Signals, connecting General Hoth's morning briefing. The call goes through normally. Clear audio. No problems. 200 meters away, buried in the forest, Yuri's receiver picks up every word. The quality is poor. The signal is weak. But it's intelligible. The tap works. Over the next 6 weeks, November 12th, 1943 through December 24th, 1943, Yuri's Splice intercepts 847 German telephone conversations. The calls include tactical orders for panzer divisions, intelligence assessments of Soviet force positions, logistics reports on fuel and ammunition stocks, damage reports from Soviet partisan attacks, evacuation plans for forward units, strategic discussions about defensive positions. Every call flows through the trunk line. Every call is intercepted. Soviet partisan intelligence analyzes the intercepts and passes critical information to Red Army Command. The intelligence value is extraordinary. Soviet forces know German unit positions before attacks. They know ammunition shortages before exploiting them. They know evacuation routes before interdicting them. The 4th Panzer Army is fighting blind against an enemy that knows its every move. And the Germans never suspect their communications are compromised. German Signals Corps conducts routine inspections of the trunk line. November 18th, inspection crews examine poles and wires. They see Yuri's Splice. It looks like a repair. They note it in their logs as field splice, kilometer marker, 47.3, condition adequate. They don't investigate further. December 3rd, another inspection. Same splice, same log entry. Previously noted repair, no change. December 15th, a German signals officer notices communications quality degradation on the trunk line. He orders a comprehensive inspection. Repair crews examine every meter of wire. They find Yuri's splice. It looks crude. They decide to replace it with a proper splice using correct materials. At 14:20 hours, December 15th, a German repair crew disconnects Yuri's splice and installs a new one using standard procedure. They don't notice the thin wire connected inside the old splice. They disconnect it unknowingly and leave it buried beneath the pole. The tap stops functioning. Yuri visits the receiver position on December 16th. No signal. The line is dead. He approaches the telephone line cautiously and sees the new Splice. Clean, professional, proper materials. His garbage splice is gone. The operation is over. 6 weeks of intelligence collection. 847 intercepted calls. 0 German awareness of the compromise. Yuri retrieves the receiver and buried wire. He erases all evidence of the tap. He returns to the partisan camp. Major Petrov greets him. The intercept stopped yesterday. The Germans replaced my splice with a proper one. They didn't detect the tap? No. They thought they were upgrading a crude repair. They never knew it was intelligence collection. 6 weeks of intercepted communications. Do you know what you've accomplished? I built a garbage splice that happened to work. You built a garbage splice that compromised an entire German army. Soviet command is calling it the most valuable intelligence operation in Ukraine. The information you provided helped Red Army plan 3 major offensives. Thousands of German casualties, dozens of destroyed tanks, all because they didn't know we were listening. Yuri shrugs. It was just wire and spit. I'm surprised it worked for 6 weeks. What Yuri doesn't know, what nobody in the partisan unit knows, is the strategic impact of his splice. The intelligence collected from November to December 1943 includes detailed German defensive plans for the Kiev sector, ammunition shortage reports indicating 4th Panzer Army had only 40% of required stocks, fuel shortage reports indicating some panzer divisions were immobilized, unit strength reports showing 4th Panzer Army was at 62% effective combat strength, evacuation plans revealing German withdrawal timelines. Soviet Red Army Command uses this intelligence to plan Operation Kiev Offensive, launched November 3rd and continuing through December. Soviet forces know exactly where German defenses are weak, exactly when German units are withdrawing, exactly where fuel and ammunition are critically short. The result, Soviet forces recapture Kiev on November 6, 1943. German 4th Panzer Army suffers 42,000 casualties and loses 260 tanks. The entire central Ukraine front collapses. Post-war analysis by Soviet military intelligence attributes 30% of the offensive's success to partisan collected signals intelligence. Yuri's garbage splice provided that intelligence. But Yuri never receives recognition. Partisan operations remain classified. The Soviet government doesn't publicize intelligence methods. Better to let the Germans think the Red Army won through superior tactics rather than reveal that a partisan electrician bugged their communications with salvaged wire. After the war, Yuri returns to his village outside Zhitomir. He resumes work as an electrician, maintaining collective farm equipment. He never speaks about the splice. In 1947, Soviet NKVD investigates partisan activities, looking for potential security risks. They interview Yuri about his wartime communications intercepts. You operated signals intelligence equipment without authorization? I spliced a wire and buried a listening coil. That's not sophisticated intelligence work. That's collective farm electrical repair applied to German communications. Did you share intercepts with Western intelligence? I shared intercepts with Major Petrov, who reported to Soviet Partisan Command. The chain of command was clear. Your methods were unorthodox. The Germans had proper materials and training. I had garbage wire and improvisation. I used what I had. The NKVD clears him, but the investigation leaves a mark. Yuri is classified as potentially unreliable due to unsupervised intelligence activities. He's denied Communist Party membership. He's excluded from career advancement. He remains a village electrician for 40 years. In 1965, a Soviet military historian researching partisan operations discovers references to Communications Intercept Operation, Zhitomir Sector, November-December 1943. The reports mention exceptional intelligence quality, but provide no details on methodology. The historian, Major Boris Sokolov, tracks down Yuri Bondarenko. Comrade Bondarenko, records indicate you conducted a communications intercept operation in 1943. Can you describe the technical approach? Yuri explains the garbage splice, the buried listening coil, the passive tap that maintained circuit continuity. Sokolov is stunned. You're describing sophisticated signals intelligence techniques that weren't formally developed until the 1950s. I'm describing how to tap a wire without the Germans noticing. It's not sophisticated. It's just hiding a connection inside a splice that looks like garbage. Did anyone teach you this technique? No. I figured it out by watching German repair crews and understanding that they don't carefully inspect repairs that look old and crude. This methodology should be documented. Why? The war is over. The Germans lost. My splice doesn't matter anymore. Sokolov attempts to publish a technical paper on Yuri's methods. The Soviet military censors reject it. Signals intelligence techniques remain classified. Publication is forbidden. The paper remains unpublished until 1991, after the Soviet Union collapses. By then, Yuri is 72 years old and retired. In 1992, independent Ukrainian historians begin investigating partisan operations during the war. They discover Sokolov's unpublished paper. They locate Yuri. Pan Bondarenko, your communications intercept operation in 1943 provided intelligence that helped Soviet forces recapture Kiev. Did you know this? I knew the intercepts were valuable. Major Petrov told me Soviet command was using them. I didn't know specifics. Post-war analysis indicates your intelligence contributed to 30% of the Kiev offensive's success. That's approximately 12,000 German casualties attributable to compromised communications. That's not how I think about it. I spliced a wire. Other people used the intelligence. They achieved the results. But without your splice, the intelligence wouldn't exist. Without hundreds of other partisan operations, the splice wouldn't matter. It was one small piece of a large effort. The historians publish an article in a Ukrainian military history journal. The article is titled, "The Garbage Splice That Compromised 4th Panzer Army." It's read by approximately 500 people, mostly military historians and signals intelligence specialists. From the German perspective, Wehrmacht signals intelligence never detected Yuri's tap. Post-war interrogations of German signals officers reveal that 4th Panzer Army staff suspected Soviet intelligence was unusually accurate in late 1943, but they attributed it to aerial reconnaissance and captured documents, not compromised communications. A 1958 German military history of the Eastern Front includes this passage. Soviet partisan operations in Ukraine demonstrated unexpected sophistication in signals intelligence. By late 1943, Soviet forces consistently demonstrated knowledge of German tactical plans and logistics status. The source of this intelligence remains unclear, though improved Soviet reconnaissance capabilities likely explain the discrepancy. The Germans never discovered they were fighting with compromised communications Because Yuri's Splice looked like garbage. It looked so crude that German signals officers never considered it could be intelligence collection. That's the genius of the operation. Hide sophistication behind apparent incompetence. Yuri Bondarenko dies on February 3, 2003, at age 83. His obituary in the local Zhitomir newspaper mentions he was a partisan during the war and worked as an electrician for 40 years. It does not mention the Splice. In 2008, the Ukrainian Institute of National Memory creates an exhibit on partisan signals intelligence operations. One display case contains a replica of Yuri's garbage splice, reconstructed from his 1965 description to Major Sokolov. The splice is crude, wrapped in rotting fabric insulation, barely functional looking. The placard reads, "Field Telephone Splice, created by Partisan Yuri Bondarenko, November 1943." This splice concealed a listening device that intercepted 847 German communications over 6 weeks. The Germans never detected the tap because it appeared to be a crude repair rather than intelligence equipment. Estimated intelligence value. Contributed to recapture of Kiev, November 1943. The exhibit is visited by approximately 2,000 people annually. Most walk past the splice without stopping. It looks like garbage. That's exactly the point. In 2015, modern signals intelligence specialists studying historical intercept techniques publish a paper analyzing Yuri's methodology. The paper, published in the International Journal of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, concludes, Bondarenko's garbage splice technique demonstrates that effective signals intelligence does not require sophisticated equipment. By creating a tap that appeared to be a field repair, Bondarenko achieved persistent access to German communications without detection. Modern signals intelligence continues to use similar principles. Hide technical collection capabilities behind apparently benign artifacts. Bondarenko pioneered this approach in 1943 using salvaged wire and collective farm electrical knowledge. The paper is cited 47 times in subsequent intelligence literature. Most citations focus on the methodology. Few mention Yuri's name. Is that enough? For a collective farm electrician who compromised an entire German army using garbage wire and improvised electrical theory, who provided intelligence that contributed to liberating Kiev and killing 12,000 German soldiers, who lived 60 years after the war fixing tractors and never seeking recognition? The 847 German officers whose conversations were intercepted would probably say it was devastating. The Red Army soldiers who benefited from compromised German intelligence would say it was invaluable. Yuri would say it was just a wire splice that happened to work longer than expected. The final accounting, duration of operation, 43 days, November 12th to December 24th, 1943. German communications intercepted, 847 telephone calls. Intelligence value, contributed to Kiev offensive success. Estimated 12,000 German casualties, 260 destroyed tanks. German detection, 0. German awareness of compromise, 0, even post-war. Materials cost, salvaged copper wire, rubber tape, fabric insulation. Total material value, approximately 12 rubles. Lives affected, 12,000 German casualties, 47,000 Soviet soldiers who benefited from intelligence advantage. Unknown number of Ukrainian civilians liberated earlier due to accelerated German withdrawal. Recognition, None until 45 years after the operation. Yuri's lasting contribution demonstrated that signals intelligence doesn't require sophisticated equipment, just understanding of electrical principles and willingness to create something that looks terrible, but functions perfectly. Sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the one that looks impressive. Sometimes it's the one that looks like garbage. Sometimes the greatest intelligence operation is the one the enemy never detects because it's hidden inside a splice so crude they dismiss it as incompetent field repair. Yuri Bondarenko was that weapon. He spliced a wire, intercepted an army, and spent 60 years afterward fixing collective farm equipment as if compromising German communications was just another routine electrical repair. Partisan electrician Yuri Bondarenko, 1919 to 2003. The man who bugged an entire German army with garbage wire and never thought it was impressive.